Look, I've been teaching combat fundamentals at the Galactic Combat Institute for 3 cycles now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Every species, every body type, every ridiculous question a cadet could possibly ask. I was wrong. So catastrophically, hilariously wrong that I still laugh about it when I'm trying to fall asleep at night. My name is Vaughn, and I'm what you'd call a junior instructor, which is a fancy way of saying I stand in the back of Professor Kell's seminars, take notes, and try not to fall asleep while he drones on about optimal firing positions and theoretical accuracy maximization. Thrilling stuff. Truly. The seminar hall that morning was packed, absolutely crammed with cadets from every corner of the galaxy. Phexians with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons. Morathians standing nearly 3 meters tall, their scales gleaming under the fluorescent lights. A cluster of Venturi twins, their telepathic link allowing them to coordinate movements with frightening precision. The usual crowd of overconfident warriors, all convinced they were going to revolutionize galactic combat doctrine. Professor Keyline himself was already at the front of the room, arranging his precious plasma rifles on the demonstration table with the kind of reverence most species reserve for religious artifacts. The professor was a Draxian, which meant he had 6 limbs, compound eyes that could track 17 different targets simultaneously, and an ego roughly the size of a small moon. His carapace was polished to an almost offensive shine, and his mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he surveyed his domain. Today, he announced, his voice amplified through the hall's speaker system, we will cover advanced weapons handling, specifically the proper grip techniques that separate professional soldiers from, well, corpses. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Keyline's jokes were never actually funny, but nobody wanted to risk annoying him. That's when I noticed the human. He was sitting in the 3rd row, and honestly, I almost missed him entirely. Humans are, to put it diplomatically, not particularly impressive at first glance. This one was maybe 1.8 meters tall, which made him shorter than almost everyone else in the room. He had the standard 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal setup that seems laughably inadequate for serious combat. His skin was this weird pinkish-tan color, and he had dark hair that looked like it hadn't seen proper grooming in days. His name, according to the roster I'd been given that morning, was Jackson Cole, exchange student from Earth, some planet out in the unfashionable end of the galaxy that nobody had heard of until about 5 years ago when they stumbled into galactic society completely by accident. Jackson was wearing the Standard Institute uniform, but somehow he made it look casual, like he was sitting in a cafeteria rather than one of the most prestigious combat seminars in known space. He had his feet propped up on the seat in front of him, completely ignoring the angry hiss from a cadet whose chair he was using as a footrest. I made a note on my datapad, human cadet. Possible discipline issue. Professor Keyline was warming up now, gesturing with 4 of his 6 arms while the other 2 held a standard-issue plasma rifle. The key to accurate firing, he explained, is mandibles clicking with each word, is establishing multiple points of contact with the weapon. This distributes recoil, stabilizes aim, and allows for rapid target transition. Observe. He positioned his primary arms on the rifle's grip and forward stock. His secondary arms wrapped around the barrel housing and power cell. His tertiary arms, the smallest pair, braced against his thorax to create a stable firing platform. It looked incredibly complex, like watching someone solve a 3-dimensional puzzle while doing calculus. This is the galactic-standard firing position, Keyline continued, his compound eyes gleaming with pride. Developed over 2,000 years by the finest military minds in 15 star systems. Every functional species in this room has the capability to achieve this position or something similar. Is scientifically optimized, mathematically perfect, utterly superior to any primitive 2-point contact method. He swept his gaze across the room, daring anyone to disagree. Most of the cadets were nodding along, some furiously taking notes. The Venturi twins were already practicing the position with imaginary rifles, their movements synchronized. The Morathians were rumbling their approval, their deep voices creating a bass harmony that vibrated through the floor. Jackson, meanwhile, was staring at the professor with his head tilted slightly to one side. He had this expression on his face that I would come to recognize over the following weeks. It wasn't quite confusion, not quite amusement, something in between, like he was watching a particularly elaborate magic trick and trying to figure out where the cards were hidden. He raised his hand. Oh no, I thought. Here we go. Professor Keyline's compound eyes swiveled toward Jackson, and I could practically hear the professor's internal sigh. Yes, Cadet Cole. You have a question already. We've barely begun. Jackson lowered his hand, that weird half-smile still on his face. Yeah, sorry. Just a quick one. Why are you holding it like that? The room went silent. Like, absolutely, completely silent. The kind of silence that happens right before something spectacular and terrible occurs. Professor Keyline's mandibles stopped clicking. His grip on the plasma rifle tightened. Several of his eyes focused directly on Jackson while the others scanned the room, perhaps checking if this was some kind of coordinated insult. I beg your pardon, Keyline said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. Jackson gestured vaguely at the professor and his complicated grip. The rifle. You're holding it with what, all 6 arms? That seems, I don't know, overly complicated. Why not just use 2 hands? Like a normal, like a simpler grip? I physically face-bombed. Actually put my manipulator directly into my frontal sensory cluster. This human had been in the Institute for less than a week, and he was already questioning a professor with 40 years of combat experience. This was going to be entertaining. Professor Keyline's mandibles began clicking again, but this time it was the slow, deliberate clicking that every cadet in the Institute had learned to fear. It was the sound of a professor trying very, very hard not to lose his temper in front of a class full of witnesses. Cadet Cole, he said, each word precisely enunciated. Perhaps you misunderstood the nature of this seminar. This is advanced weapons handling, not introduction to basic concepts that even hatchlings understand. A few snickers erupted from Ephexian cadets in the front row. The Morathians were making that rumbling sound they do when they find something amusing, which honestly sounds more like an avalanche than laughter. Jackson, to his credit, didn't look embarrassed at all. He just nodded slowly, like Keyline had made a perfectly reasonable point. Right, yeah, I get that. Advanced. But I'm just wondering, like, from a practical standpoint, why use 6 arms when 2 would work fine? Isn't that just more things to coordinate, more points of failure? Oh, this was getting good. I pulled out my datapad and started recording. This was either going to be a legendary educational moment or spectacular humiliation, and either way, I wanted documentation. Professor Keyline set the plasma rifle down on the demonstration table with exaggerated care. He clasped 4 of his hands together in front of his thorax, a gesture that among Draxians signals extreme patience being exercised. His other 2 hands gestured toward the weapon. Cadet Cole, let me explain something to you. Something that apparently your primitive education system failed to cover. The word primitive hung in the air like a slap. The galactic standard firing position is not some random arrangement. It is the result of millennia of research, countless simulation hours, and the combined wisdom of dozens of species far more experienced in warfare than your homeworld. Jackson nodded again. Sure, that makes sense. But how much research was done on species with only 2 arms? Because it seems like the whole system is designed for people with, extra limbs. Several cadets gasped. You just didn't question the galactic standard. It was like questioning gravity or the speed of light. It was fundamental. Keyline's compound eyes were now entirely focused on Jackson, all 17 lenses locked onto the human like targeting systems. The galactic standard works for every combat-capable species in known space. Phexians use 4 arms. Morathians use 2 arms and their tail as a brace. Venturi use 2 arms and psychic stabilization. The system is adaptable. Right. Jackson leaned forward in his seat, genuinely engaged now. But if you've got all these different species doing different variations, is it really a standard, or is it more like a general suggestion that everyone modifies anyway? I had to bite my feeding appendage to keep from laughing out loud. The human had a point, a ridiculous, probably suicidal point to make in front of Professor Keyline, but a point nonetheless. Keyline's carapace was starting to darken, which in Draxians indicates rising blood pressure. The principle remains constant, Cadet Cole. Multiple points of contact, distributed recoil management, stable firing platform. These are not suggestions. These are fundamental laws of accurate weapons handling. Jackson scratched his head, messing up his already chaotic hair even more. Okay, but here's what I'm not getting. On Earth, we've been shooting projectile weapons for thousands of years, right? And we figured out pretty early that you really only need 2 points of contact. 1 hand on the grip, 1 hand supporting the front. Simple, easy to teach, easy to do under stress. Why would adding more contact points make it better if 2 works fine? The room erupted. Not in agreement, but in outrage. Did he just compare galactic standard doctrine to primitive projectile weapons? Ephexian shouted. Thousands of years. Try 50,000 cycles of refinement, a Morathian roared. The Venturi twins were telepathically conferring, their faces showing identical expressions of disbelief. Professor Keyline raised two of his hands for silence. The room obeyed immediately, though angry muttering continued from various corners. "Cadet Cole," Keyline said, his voice now icily calm, "I think perhaps a demonstration is in order. Since you seem so confident in your species' primitive methods, why don't you come down here and show the class exactly how a human holds a weapon? We could all use a good laugh before we continue with actual professional instruction." Oh, this was about to get very interesting. Jackson stood up, and I swear he was smiling. Not nervously, not apologetically. The human looked genuinely excited. "Yeah, okay," he said, making his way down the steps toward the demonstration table. "I can do that. Thanks, Professor." Keyline's mandibles clicked once, sharply. It was the sound of a predator who thought he'd just cornered easy prey. I increased my datapad's recording resolution. Something told me I was going to want to watch this again later. Jackson walked down to the demonstration table like he was heading to lunch, not toward what was clearly meant to be a public execution of his credibility. His stride was relaxed, casual, even, the kind of walk that said he either had absolutely no idea what he was walking into or he knew exactly what he was doing and found the whole situation hilarious. I was betting on the former. Humans were new to galactic society. They probably had no concept of proper weapons handling. This was going to be painful to watch. Professor Keyline gestured magnanimously toward the plasma rifle on the table. "Please, Cadet Cole, show us this revolutionary human technique. Enlighten us all with the wisdom of, what did you say, thousands of years of experience." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a vibroblade. Several cadets were already smirking, anticipating the show. The Fexians in the front row had their recording devices out. This was going to be shared across the entire Institute network within minutes. Jackson approached the table, looking down at the plasma rifle with his head tilted slightly. He reached out with one hand, just one, and picked it up by the grip. The gasps were immediate. He was holding a military-grade plasma rifle with one hand, just casually holding it like it was a datapad or a sandwich. His other hand wasn't even touching the weapon yet. He was supporting the entire weight of a 4-kilogram rifle with just his primary appendage. "Okay," Jackson said, turning the rifle over in his hand, examining it. "So this is pretty similar to our kinetic rifles back home. Grip here, trigger here, safety, magazine release." He pointed to each component as he spoke. Weight distribution is a bit forward-heavy, but not terrible. Professor Keyline's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. He was staring at Jackson with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It might have been confusion. It might have been the early stages of realization that he'd made a terrible mistake. Jackson's other hand came up, gripping the front of the rifle's barrel housing in a simple, straightforward hold. 2 hands, 2 points of contact. That was it. "This is how we do it," Jackson said, bringing the rifle up to what I assumed was a human firing position. The stock, such as it was on a plasma rifle, tucked into his shoulder. His cheek rested against the side of the weapon, both eyes aligned with the basic iron sights. His stance shifted, one foot slightly forward, knees bent just a fraction. It looked wrong. Compared to the elaborate multi-limb galactic standard position, it looked absurdly simple, childishly basic. "That's it," a Morathian cadet called out from the back. 2 hands. "That's your advanced human technique." Jackson lowered the rifle, smiling. "Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are variations, different stances for different situations, but the fundamentals are simple. Keep it simple, keep it fast, keep it effective." Professor Keyline had recovered his composure, or at least the appearance of it. His mandibles resumed their clicking, though faster now, agitated. "Well, how quaint. I suppose we should see this simplicity in action, shouldn't we? The firing range is active. Perhaps a comparison would be educational." He gestured toward the range door with 2 of his arms, while his other 4 began configuring his own rifle. "I will demonstrate proper technique first, then you may attempt to match it with your primitive methods." The class filed into the observation gallery, overlooking the firing range. It was a massive space, easily 200 meters long, with holographic targets that could move, dodge, and even return simulated fire. Professor Keyline had configured a basic accuracy course, 10 static targets at varying distances, 50 to 150 meters. Standard evaluation protocol. Keyline stepped up to the firing line, assuming his perfect galactic standard position. All 6 arms engaged, multiple contact points established. His stance was textbook, absolutely flawless. I had to admit, whatever else you could say about him, the professor knew his craft. Observe, he announced through the range's communication system. Proper breathing control, proper trigger discipline, proper recoil management. He fired. The plasma bolts lanced downrange in neat, controlled bursts. Target 1 hit center mass. Target 2 hit upper thorax. Target 3 hit. Target 4 hit. He worked through all 10 targets methodically, professionally. His accuracy was good. Very good, actually. 8 hits out of 10 in the primary scoring zones, 2 hits in secondary zones. The cadets in the observation gallery applauded politely. It was a solid performance, exactly what you'd expect from a decorated professor with decades of experience. Keyline lowered his rifle, his compound eyes gleaming with satisfaction. 85% primary zone accuracy. Well above passing standards for this course level. The result of proper technique, proper training, and proper doctrine. He turned toward Jackson, who was waiting patiently at the ready line. Cadet Cole, please dazzle us with your human methods. Do try not to miss every target. It would be embarrassing. More snickers from the gallery. The Fexians were definitely recording this. I had my data pad aimed squarely at Jackson, capturing every angle. Jackson stepped up to the line, that same casual energy radiating from him. He checked the rifle's power cell, flipped the safety off with his thumb, and brought the weapon up into his simple two-handed grip. Yeah, no problem, he said, his voice calm, almost bored. 10 targets, right? Static positioning. Correct, Keyline confirmed, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. Cool. Give me like 30 seconds. 30 seconds. For 10 targets. Keyline had taken nearly 2 minutes with his careful, measured approach. Jackson's stance shifted slightly, his weight rolling forward onto the balls of his feet. Range is hot, the automated system announced. Commence firing. What happened next, I'm not exaggerating, was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen in a training environment. Jackson moved. The first plasma bolt left Jackson's rifle before I'd even finished blinking. Target 1, center mass, perfect hit. But he was already moving. His entire body rotated smoothly to the left, the rifle tracking with him like it was an extension of his arms rather than a separate object. Target 2 acquired fired hit. Upper thorax, dead center. 3 seconds had elapsed. Target 3 was at a 45-degree angle from his position. Jackson pivoted on his forward foot, his rear legs sweeping around in an arc that somehow kept his upper body completely stable. The rifle never wavered. Fire, hit, center mass again. What the? Someone muttered in the observation gallery. Target 4 was the furthest one, 150 meters downrange. Jackson's stance shifted again, this time dropping into a lower position, one knee touching the ground. The rifle came up, his cheek pressed against the stock, both eyes focused down the sights. Fire. Hit. Primary scoring zone. He was back on his feet before the targeting system had even confirmed the hit. 5, 6, 7. Bang, bang, bang. 3 targets in rapid succession, each one hit perfectly, each movement flowing into the next like he was performing some kind of choreographed dance. His feet never stopped moving, constantly adjusting, shifting weight, finding new angles. I had stopped breathing. I think everyone in the observation gallery had stopped breathing. Target 8 required him to move to a completely different firing position, about 3 meters to his right, to get a clear line of sight past a simulated obstacle. Jackson transitioned, not running exactly, but moving with this focused urgency that ate up the distance in seconds. He planted, aimed, fired. Hit. 15 seconds total had passed. 2 targets left. The power cell indicator on Jackson's rifle flashed yellow. He was running low on charge. In a real combat situation, this would be the moment where you calculated whether you had enough for your remaining shots, where you made tactical decisions about conservation versus aggression. Jackson ejected the power cell with one hand while moving toward his next firing position. His other hand was already reaching to his belt where training cells were magnetically attached. He grabbed a fresh one, slapped it into the rifle's receiver, and charged the weapon. The entire reload took maybe 2 seconds. He didn't even slow down. Target 9 hit center mass. Target 10 was positioned at an awkward elevated angle, simulating an enemy on higher ground. Jackson dropped into a kneeling position again, this time leaning back slightly, his spine curved to achieve the correct firing angle. The rifle came up smoothly. Fire. Hit. Primary zone. The range's automated system chimed. Course complete. Time, 22 seconds. Accuracy, 10 out of 10 targets, primary scoring zone. Performance rating, exceptional. The observation gallery was silent. Not the polite silence from before. not the anticipatory silence of people waiting for entertainment. This was the stunned, shocked silence of people whose entire understanding of reality had just been violently adjusted. Jackson stood up, engaged the rifle's safety, and walked back to the ready line like he'd just finished a light warm-up exercise. He wasn't even breathing hard. Professor Keyline was staring at the targeting display like it had personally insulted his ancestors. His mandibles were frozen mid-click. Several of his eyes were focused on the screen, the others on Jackson, the rest darting around as if searching for some explanation, some trick, some malfunction in the system that could explain what had just happened. "That," a Morathian cadet whispered, her voice filled with something between awe and fear. "That shouldn't be possible with only 2 arms." "How did he reload that fast?" Aphexian demanded. "We use 3 hands for magazine changes. He did it with 1, while moving." The Venturi twins were communicating telepathically, their faces showing identical expressions of complete bewilderment. I realized my jaw was hanging open. I closed it, opened it again, closed it. My data pad was still recording, which was good, because otherwise I would have convinced myself I'd hallucinated the entire thing. Jackson set the rifle down on the demonstration table gently, respectfully. He looked up at the observation gallery, shielding his eyes from the overhead lights. "So, was that okay? I know I went a bit fast. I can go slower if you want to see the technique breakdown." Go slower. He wanted to know if he should go slower. This absolute lunatic had just posted a perfect accuracy score in 1/3 the time it took our decorated professor, using a grip that everyone in the galaxy considered primitive, and he was asking if he went too fast. Professor Keyline finally found his voice. "Cadet Cole, where did you—" He stopped, his mandibles clicking erratically. He was a professor, a decorated veteran. He had vocabulary. He should be able to form sentences. He tried again. "Your technique. That was the reload. You performed a combat reload while transitioning between firing positions. With only 2 hands. Jackson nodded, looking genuinely confused by the professor's confusion. "Yeah, that's pretty standard. I mean, that's how we train back home. You have to be able to reload under stress, while moving, while maintaining situational awareness. Standing still to reload is a good way to get shot. But you only have 2 hands." The shout came from somewhere in the observation gallery. I think it was one of the Phexians, but honestly, it could have been anyone. It was what everyone was thinking. Jackson looked down at his hands, turning them over like he was just now noticing them. "Yeah, 2 hands. That's kind of the point, though. We had to figure out how to do everything efficiently because we don't have extras. Every movement has to count. No wasted motion, no unnecessary complexity." He picked up the rifle again, demonstrating in slow motion. "See, grip here, support hand here. When you reload, support hand drops, grabs new cell, inserts. Grip hand never leaves the weapon. You maintain control the entire time. Primary hand stays on target, ready to fire immediately once reload completes. Simple, fast, effective. Simple, fast, effective." The 3 words hung in the air like an indictment of everything the Galactic Combat Institute had been teaching for generations. Professor Keyline sat down heavily on the nearest bench. His 6 arms hung limply at his sides. His compound eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing. "Thousands of years," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. 50,000 cycles of doctrine development. 17 species contributing to the galactic standard. And a human from a planet we discovered 5 years ago. He couldn't finish the sentence. Jackson looked genuinely concerned now. "Hey, Professor, I didn't mean to, I wasn't trying to show anyone up. You asked me to demonstrate human technique, so I did. I thought that was the point of the exercise." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, the complete reversal of expectations, the look on Keyline's face, it all hit me at once, and I just lost it. Within seconds, other cadets were joining in. Not mocking laughter, not cruel laughter, just the kind of hysterical laughter that happens when your brain can't process what it just witnessed through any other emotional channel. The human had just revolutionized weapons handling doctrine in 22 seconds, and he thought he might have gone too fast. Professor Keyline recovered after about 30 seconds of staring into the middle distance like a cadet who just failed their first live fire exercise. His mandibles started clicking again, slowly at first, then building to a rapid staccato that I recognized as his thinking pattern. He stood up, all 6 arms flexing in what might have been frustration or might have been grudging respect. Hard to tell with Draxians sometimes. "Cadet Cole," he said, his voice carefully controlled now, stripped of the earlier sarcasm. I need you to explain something to me. Where exactly did you learn those techniques? That was not amateur hour shooting. That was professional-grade weapons handling. Military standard at minimum. Possibly special operations level. Jackson shrugged, completely oblivious to the weight of the question. I mean, yeah, I did my mandatory service in the Terran Defense Corps before coming here. Everyone back home does at least 2 years. It's kind of required if you want to qualify for off-world programs. Mandatory service. Everyone back home. The words hung in the air like proximity mines. A Phexian cadet raised one of her 4 hands tentatively. Everyone? You mean every human serves in the military? Well, not every single person, Jackson clarified, scratching his head again. There are exemptions for medical stuff, essential civilian roles, that kind of thing. But yeah, most humans do a stint. It's just part of growing up. You finish secondary education, you do your service, then you figure out what you want to do with your life. Pretty normal. Pretty normal. An entire species that considered military training pretty normal. Professor Keeline's eyes were doing that thing again, where they all focused on Jackson simultaneously. And these techniques you demonstrated, this is what you were taught during your mandatory service. Yeah. Basic infantry training covers weapons handling, small unit tactics, survival skills, all that fundamental stuff. The reload drills, the rapid target acquisition, moving while firing, that's all like week 3 material. Maybe week 4, depending on your instructor. Jackson paused, thinking. Actually, I specialized in close quarters combat later on, so I got extra training in confined space shooting, but the basics are the same. Week 3 material. Week 3 material. I checked my data pad, scrolling through the Institute's curriculum. Our cadets spent an entire semester, 16 weeks, learning the galactic-standard firing position. Another semester on accuracy fundamentals. Reload drills weren't even introduced until the 2nd year of training. This human had learned what we considered advanced techniques in less than a month. One of the Morathian cadets stood up, his massive frame towering even in the observation gallery. You said humans have been refining these techniques for thousands of years. But you also said your world only recently joined galactic society. If you're not fighting in space, who are you fighting? Oh, that was the question, wasn't it? Jackson's expression shifted slightly. The casual, friendly demeanor dimmed just a fraction, replaced by something harder, something that reminded you that despite his small frame and easy smile, this was someone who had been trained to end lives efficiently. Each other mostly, he said quietly. Humans have been at war for, well, basically our entire recorded history. Different nations, different ideologies, different resources, different religions. We fought with sticks and rocks at first, then spears, then swords, then bows, then gunpowder weapons, then automatic weapons, then we invented aircraft, tanks, submarines, missiles, nuclear weapons. He listed them off like he was reciting a grocery list, not cataloging an endless parade of violence. Every single advancement in human technology has been accompanied by us figuring out how to kill each other more efficiently with it. We fought wars that kill millions, wars that reshaped continents, wars that nearly ended our entire species. He looked down at the plasma rifle in his hands. So yeah, we got pretty good at weapons handling. We didn't really have a choice. The species that figured out better tactics survived. The ones that didn't. The observation gallery was dead silent now. Not shocked silent, not confused silent. The kind of profound, uncomfortable silent that happens when you realize you've been fundamentally wrong about something important. Professor Keeline sat back down. He looked tired suddenly. Older. We developed our combat doctrine in simulation labs in controlled environments with safety protocols and ethical review boards. His voice was soft, reflective. We optimized for theoretical scenarios. We debated the mathematics of firing positions in academic journals. We haven't fought a major galactic conflict in 300 cycles. We wrote ours in blood, Jackson said simply. Every technique, every tactic, every fundamental principle was tested in actual combat. If it didn't work, people died. If it did work, it got passed down, refined, improved. Generation after generation. War after war. He set the rifle down gently. That's why it looks simple. We stripped out everything that didn't work under actual combat stress. No extra movements. No complicated positions that fall apart when someone's shooting back. Just what works. What keeps you alive. I was making notes on my data pad, but my hands were shaking slightly. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. We had advanced technologies, sophisticated training programs, detailed doctrine developed by committees of experts. We thought we were the pinnacle of military science. And then this species shows up, fresh from a planet where they'd spent millennia perfecting the art of killing each other, and they casually demonstrate that everything we thought we knew was overcomplicated nonsense built on theories instead of experience. A Venturi twin spoke up, her voice hesitant. So when you look at our galactic standard position, our elaborate techniques, our multi-limbed advantages, what do you see? Jackson considered the question seriously, his head tilted in that thoughtful way of his. Honestly, I see people who've never had to reload while someone was trying to kill them. I see techniques that would get you killed in real combat because they're too slow, too complicated, too easy to screw up under stress. He held up his hands apologetically. No offense. Your accuracy is great. Your form is perfect. But form doesn't mean much when the shooting starts for real. Professor Keyline laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone whose entire career had just been revealed as built on a foundation of comfortable assumptions. None taken, Cadet Cole, he said, standing up and walking toward the demonstration table. He picked up the plasma rifle, looked at it for a long moment, then set it down and gripped again, this time with just 2 of his 6 hands. I think, he said slowly, we have a lot to learn from Earth. And I suspect this institute's curriculum is about to undergo some significant revisions. Jackson grinned. Cool. Want me to show you the proper grip for real? I started laughing again, and this time Professor Keyline joined in. The galaxy was about to get a very uncomfortable education in the difference between theoretical warfare and the real thing, and it was going to be taught by a species we dismissed as primitive newcomers. Turns out, primitives who survive thousands of years of constant warfare learn a thing or two about fighting. This is HFY Sage of Stars, bringing you stories of humanity's strength among the stars.